everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to be back and be filming. I took kind of a little mini break. My sister actually just got married, so I ended up taking a week off from filming, and then here we are 2 weeks later, finally back with a video. The ceremony was beautiful, the day was beautiful. It was a very fast and stressful but very fun day. And now that I am back to real life, I am back to reading, back to doing my hobbies, and back to filming videos. So today's video, we are actually going to be talking about all of the books that I read in August and in September. I'm actually going to start with talking about all of the books that I read most recently and then go back in time, back to August, just because I think most of, if not all of the books that I read in August were in videos, and I just really want to talk about the books that I've been reading recently. I say that, but unfortunately, I am in a reading slump. Who would have guessed? I haven't read a book, I want to say, in like a week and a half, maybe a week, and unfortunately, the last 4 books that I've picked up, I have not DNF'd, but I've definitely just put to the side and been like, I'm gonna come back to this when I'm actually in the mood to read this. So that is very unfortunate for me. I don't know what it is. I'm kind of feeling like I've read way too many books and every story is just feeling the same. So I need just a little reset to focus on other hobbies and do other things outside of reading. That being said, today's video is focused all on books. So without further ado, let's talk about my most recent reads. I don't remember what my last book I read is. I have an idea, but I want to double check just because it's been quite a while since I've read. My first book of this video, I would say my first book that I read, but that would be a lie. I finally got around to reading The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Now, this is a book that I have seen all over social media. You're probably most familiar with the fig tree metaphor and quote that happens in the book. In this story, we are following, from my understanding, what actually is Sylvia, but it's our main character as she is going through, honestly, like the deterioration, I don't know if I said that right, of her mental health. She's slowly getting more and more mentally unhealthy. I don't want to spoil how the ending is, but it is a very interesting story. That being said, there are so many things about this story that made me very uncomfortable while reading it. This book, unfortunately, has a lot of racism in the story, and it does make you very uncomfortable while you're reading it. On top of that, there is a lot of talk about self-harm. There is attempted that happens in the story. Honestly, if this is a book that you do want to pick up, I would like highly recommend to look into trigger warnings of this story. So I did not rate this book. I enjoyed reading the book. However, I enjoyed reading it because I went into the story looking at it from a more critical lens. I wanted to read the story and kind of see like, why do people really love this story? See what bits and pieces that I could dissect from the book itself. And I think if you go into this story with that sort of mindset that you're going to like the book, I think if you just go into it thinking that it is, I feel like it's always broadcasted as a super feminist book and a feminine rage piece of literature. If you go in with that mindset, I don't think you're gonna like it as much. I think you need to go into it with a more critical mindset and just lens. I think a lot of classics, I have learned that I don't necessarily enjoy reading them, but I see the value of reading them. I enjoy my time reading it because it gets me to think critically of literature. I did like this story. I don't have a rating for it. I would recommend it if you're thinking about it, but please look into trigger warnings. All of the other books I have in my little journal, this is actually like the last few entries of this journal I used on braiding all these books. This was a journal for this year, already filled up. I already started my other journal and that's literally already almost a quarter gone. It's very easy to fill journals when you're a girl who's never moved on from anything that's happened to her before. The next book that I read is one that I honestly wasn't expecting a lot from, and it was Powerful by Lauren Roberts. Now this is the novella of the Powerless series. This follows Peyton's best friend, and it goes in the exact timeline of Powerless. So honestly, you've probably heard so many people talk about this book, but it follows a side character and her story of what she goes through in the book. Now, the thing is, when this book came out, everyone was talking about how they were crying at the end of it, how they were so nervous to get to the end of the book, and honestly, I don't remember anything that happened in Powerless, and I'm probably never going to reread the book. That being said, I did really like the ending of this book, but it was very just intense and insane and very sad. I don't know. I liked how, as I was reading the story, I was remembering what happens in Powerless. I actually like this book a lot more than I liked Powerless. I could have read this book if it was like a full 400-page book. It was that good. I loved it that much. That being said, I don't know if I'm going to continue on with the series. I have heard a lot of people say that Reckless is like a filler book. It's kind of a waste of a story in space, and that makes me nervous. I don't know. I feel like I read the Red Queen series before I read Powerless, and I believe Powerless is heavily inspired by the Red Queen series, and especially one of the tropes that is in Powerless I just don't care for. So I'm not sure if I'm going to continue on with the series. I think if I could get it from the library, I'll maybe give the last book a chance, but I'm definitely not going to buy it myself. I did give Powerful a 4-star. I think it would have been a 5-star if it was just a bit longer. Ooh, this next book is kind of a doozy. So I read The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. This is a thriller book that I feel like, I don't want to say it's beloved in like the booktube YouTube community, but it is a book that I've always seen people read if they really like thrillers. Riley Sager is just like an icon auto-buy author for a lot of booktubers. And so I read this book, went into it not knowing a lot. This is a story revolving around our main character. She recently lost her husband, I believe it is, or her boyfriend that she was just engaged to. Fiance? Hey, I wouldn't know. I don't know what love feels like. She lives in this cabin, and across the lake there is another couple that lives in another cabin, but their cabin is pretty much just floor to ceiling windows. So she ends up basically watching them through binoculars, and she sees something one night, and the story kind of unfolds from there. I don't know if I like the thriller genre anymore. Listen, here's my thing. I've said it once, I'll say it again. I really hate when thrillers end with a lot of plot twists to the point where it feels messy and it feels unrealistic. This takes kind of a paranormal turn that I really don't like. Also, there were so many plot twists and just turns in this story that it made things become plot holes. Like it just doesn't make sense if you think too critically about the storyline itself. And because of that, I did give this book a 2 out of 5, which is kind of a bummer because I was really looking forward to this book. I had been on a wait list on Libby for like weeks, really excited to read this book, and it didn't hit the spot. The next book that I read was very, very much out of my comfort zone, and I actually DNF'd this book. This, I think, was kind of the start of me getting in a little bit of a reading slump where if it's genuinely not a book that I'm in the direct mood to read, I'm gonna DNF it. So I read Slewfoot by Brom. I think I got halfway through the book before I DNF'd it. This book takes place in 1600s. I think it's Puritan New England or Connecticut. And our main character, she is, I would say, like a witch. She's a little bit more spiritual. Something happens in the beginning of the book where she ends up having to produce a crop. Otherwise, she's gonna be in a lot of trouble. And we follow her POV as well as following the POV of Slewfoot, which is, you know, the land's version of the devil or Satan. I really liked how moody and dark this book felt until I didn't. I think the writing of the book is great. However, there are, I don't know what they would actually be called, but they're like children or like spirits of the woods that are in this story that are always talking to Slewfoot, and I found them so ungodly annoying. The thing is about the story is it was fun and interesting, but not interesting enough for me to finish the story out, so I DNF'd it. I honestly don't even really know what happens. I tried Googling the ending of the book. That's honestly a hard DNF. I'm probably never gonna go back to the story, which is unfortunate because I feel like people who really love that book really love that book. And it's a beautiful, fun, interesting cover. So I was going into it really hoping to like it because that was going to be the start of my like moody fall reads. But unfortunately, I think that's kind of the book that kicked me into a slump where I no longer want to pick up books. And I've now been in that for so long. Right before I picked up Slewfoot, I actually picked up probably the book that has been my favorite book that I've read recently, and that is The Reappearance of Rachel Price. This is a book by Holly Jackson, who is the same author of the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, and I gave this book a 4.5. It was so good, so intriguing, and the twist at the end actually made sense, and it didn't feel unrealistic. I really enjoyed how the book felt like it could have been a real true crime story. So The Reappearance of Rachel Price, our main character is the daughter of a woman who went missing, and she is basically like, it's an infamous story in the town. They are interviewing all of the family members for this like Netflix original documentary type of situation. And as they are filming for this, the mom actually ends up showing up. That is not a spoiler. That is literally A, the title of the book, and B, in the back of the book. This book goes on so many different storylines and twists and turns, but it felt realistic. It didn't feel like Holly Jackson was just trying to get you to be confused with who did it. In the end, it was a very dark and kind of disturbing story, but I really liked it. And honestly, I think it is Holly Jackson's best book that she's ever released. I've read the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I listened to Five Survive, and then I read The Reappearance of Rachel Price, and I actually listened to some of it on audiobook. And I would say if you don't have the book physically, check it out on Spotify. I really liked the audiobook. But yeah, this is definitely her best work. I really loved that book. Would recommend. And then I actually got my first ever ARC. I had someone from this author's team reach out to me and offer me an ARC. That being said, all of these opinions are 100% my own about this story, but I got to read The Duchess of Kokora. So this book is a YA fantasy romance. Honestly, this book reminds me of the Selection series, except more fantasy vibes, and also it has LGBTQ representation. I gave this book a 3-star. In the beginning of the book and kind of halfway through the book, I honestly thought it was going to be a 3.75 or maybe even a 3.5. My main trouble with this book was just the way that it was written. I could not focus on the story and the characters themselves. Sometimes I would be reading the chapters and I wouldn't realize that like a scene would have switched or the POV would have switched. So that's kind of why my rating was a little bit lower. I do think this book would be really great for younger readers who haven't read a lot of fantasy stories, or also just people who are just getting into this genre. I think this story is great because I never read fantasy books that have LGBTQ representation, and especially this being a YA fantasy book, I really enjoyed that. But yeah, if you really like the Selection series but you like more fantasy vibes, I would check this book out. And then getting into all of the books that I read in August. So in August, I actually filmed a video where my sister and her then fiance, now husband, picked out the books that I would read for a week. So I read Crazy Rich Asians, I read My Life Next Door, and then I also read How to Find Love in a Bookshop. So starting with How to Find Love in a Bookshop, I actually DNF'd that book. I thought it was going to be more of like a rom-com, more romancy book, but it was more literary contemporary fiction. It is about our main character whose father dies, so she has to take over his bookstore in order to keep it up and running, and just keep it as a part of the community. And the thing is I think if the storyline would have followed just the daughter and then her finding love in the bookstore, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But this story actually follows, I think it's like 4 or 5 different POVs of characters and how they found love in the bookstore. It just was a lot of POVs and I did not care about the characters enough to want to continue with the story. So I did DNF that book. I read Crazy Rich Asians. I loved that book. It was so good. I actually need to see if I can find the other books in the series at my library. I gave it a 4 out of 5. If you've ever seen the movie, it's honestly pretty similar, but there are some differences to some of the characters in the movie. Crazy Rich Asians is about this family who is rich to the point where they're invisible. They're so rich that people don't know who this family is. And so our main characters, I would say they're the main characters, but you do follow a couple POVs in the story. Our main character is getting married to the son of this family, and she ends up going to Singapore to go to his best friend, or it's his cousin's wedding. And then you're pretty much following different POVs as the different characters in this family and friend group are going through their own things in life. I thought it was so good. It is so well written and so entertaining. You feel so connected to the characters as you're reading the book. I would recommend reading this so much. It was so fun, and I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did, but I'm very glad that I did. So read Crazy Rich Asians, 4 out of 5. And then I read My Life Next Door, which if I were to compare it to any book that I've read before, I would compare it to The Summer I Turned Pretty. It is a YA romance book. Our main character is a Republican senator's daughter. She is from a very clean-cut type A type of family, and her neighbors are basically the exact opposite of what her family is, and her mom has basically forbidden her to ever get to know them, ever go and hang out with them, anything like that. And of course, she falls in love with one of the boys in that family. You kind of follow their relationship. There is a storyline in this book that is genuinely insane, and reading it, I was like, hold up. It aged really bad. It's not written well. I feel like that's kind of a harsh comment. It's not that it's not written well, but it aged really bad. You can tell it's a 2010s YA romance. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you have read it in the past and you want to go down nostalgia road, maybe read it. But if you want a recommendation kind of in that sort of like YA cute nostalgic reads, I honestly would just read The Summer I Turned Pretty series. I read A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. This is the same author of The 7-Year Slip, and I loved this book. I think I'm one of the very few that actually liked this book. I've heard a lot of people say that they did not like this book, which is surprising to me. I loved this book. I thought it was so cute. Our main character is going through a life event, and every year she always meets up with her book club, but this year no one in the book club can actually go to their little like vacation that they do, and so she ends up deciding to just go on it because she really needs the escape from life and reality. And while she is on the like road trip to go there, she ends up basically stopping in the town from her favorite book series, and she meets all of her favorite characters, and she ends up falling for this one guy. It is a very like cheesy, you can tell how the storyline is going to go book, but it was exactly what I needed. It was so cute and fun to read. At the end, like the third act breakup that happens felt a little unnecessary. I knew it was coming, I knew it was going to happen, but it also was like, okay, I guess. But other than that, I really liked the book and I gave it a 4 out of 5. Then I read another YA book. This is like a YA horror kind of fantasy book, and this is The Bad Ones by Melissa Albert. I got this book 100% just because the cover is beautiful. It is so freaking gorgeous. I can't stop talking about it. In this world, there is this thing called the Goddess Game. I want to say it's kind of like Bloody Mary, I guess, if you were to try and explain it in terms that everyone would understand. But it is this like fictional kind of like scare your kids story of this goddess who will come and take the bad ones. Basically in this story, I think there were 3 kids that end up disappearing, and our main character's best friend is one of the kids. And so you're following her as she's trying to figure out what happened. There is a little bit of kind of like a paranormal element to the story. Unfortunately, I really didn't like how the book wrapped up, and because of that, I only gave the book a 3.5. Not that that is a bad rating at all. I really enjoyed the book. I liked the atmospheric writing and how I felt while reading it. Again, I feel like my brain doesn't shut off, and books need to make sense, and if you think too hard about this ending, there are so many plot holes and just things that don't make sense about the story. So I didn't love the book. I would recommend it, especially I think it would be a great book to read this month in October. If you need any sort of like spooky, fast-paced YA books, pick this up, but don't think too hard about the ending. There's only 2 more books to go. I read The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. This book, again, has such a beautiful cover. I don't know what it is with romance authors in the second half of the year, but everyone was coming out with the prettiest romance covers with the brightest colors. I loved this book. However, I didn't love it as much as A Novel Love Story. This book is about our main character who ends up dying, not in a sad way at all. It's kind of comedic, and she has kind of lived a very sad life. The one thing I hate about this book is, and I talked about this in a reading vlog where I read this book, it kind of portrays women who are single, don't have kids, never had a boyfriend, kind of portrays them as like sad, lonely, it's embarrassing, and I really hate that. You are beautiful no matter if you've ever been in a relationship or if you've never been in one. So I did not like that about this story. But that being said, it is kind of a point of this story that she's never really been in a serious relationship, and because of that, basically in the afterlife waiting room, she ends up meeting one of her soulmates, and she strikes a deal with the lady who's in the afterlife waiting room to go back down to earth. And I think she has like 10 days or it's a week where she has to find him and get him to kiss her on his own free will. And so she goes back down to earth, and you follow her adventure of trying to find him. Halfway through the book, I definitely guessed how the story was going, and I'm very happy that the story went the way that it did. It's so cute, and I think there are so many cute things that, I don't know, like invisible string ties everyone together. So I really enjoyed that, and especially looking back on it, I like thinking about the story. So I think that's always a good sign when you remember a book, how like happy you get remembering the story. I gave that book a 3.75. It was so close to a 4-star. That's honestly probably me just being picky, but loved that book, would recommend. Finally, the last book we're going to talk about in this video is a book that took Book Talk, BookTube by storm 2 months ago, August. July. Honestly, I don't really remember. But this is Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Unfortunately, I did not have the reading experience that everyone else did with this book. I thought this book was way too long. Like genuinely way too long. I gave this book a 3 out of 5, so I obviously didn't hate it. It's not memorable to the point where I read it a month ago and could not tell you what happened in this book at all. So I need to look at my notes. These are my notes. 200 pages too long. Interesting fantasy world, but towards the end it felt like the story was dragging on. So I didn't even write anything about what the storyline is. I'm really trying to remember this. I believe our main character lives in what is like this world's version of like the slums, and she ends up committing a crime and getting caught for it. In this world, they have what is called Quicksilver, which in my mind I was imagining like liquid silver that you can like travel through. I don't know if that's true or not, but whatever. And she ends up meeting this guy who like kind of rescues her, but then he kind of uses her. It's supposed to be enemies to lovers, but genuinely I don't remember what happened in this book. I just remember that I read it. And that it was way too long. So yeah, those were all of the books that I've read recently. I would say give me recommendations for books to check out, but I think I might take a little step back from reading and focus on some of my other hobbies in life. I recently got a PC, so I'm going to absolutely play Among Us, and I also really want to get back into playing a lot more guitar. You wouldn't be able to guess that I play guitar with these nails, but I do. I need to rip these nails off. I don't know why I'm rambling, but I haven't filmed in a while and I missed you guys. If you have not already, make sure to subscribe. I will be back with another video. Might not be book related. I'm kind of thinking about doing like a little vlog or something, but yeah, if there are any videos you want me to film, what you would like to see on this channel, let me know down below. So yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube things. It really helps my channel out. Again, bye. This is probably the most awkward outro I've ever filmed. Anyways, love you. Goodbye.